Welcome back to Ready Player None, the only podcast about Spy Kids 3D. You find yourself listening to Chapter 23 of a podcast. Exits are North, South, and Dennis. Play episode. The episode begins to play. Somehow, Artemis and H have both managed to get the Jade Key before Wade, who is busy playing Pac-Man in a pizza place. Tipped off by a clue from H, Wade heads towards the planet Frobos, a world based on text adventure games. But what will he do next? The first portion of this chapter is dedicated to setting the scene. Frobos is one of a group of worlds called the XYZZY cluster. Zizzy cluster? Dizzy the Egg cluster? I don't know. All the planets there date back to the early days of the Oasis, and they all recreate different MUDs and text adventures. I'm quite interested to see how the, text-based adventuring translates into a virtual reality environment. And then there's a significantly long paragraph here telling the reader what a text adventure actually is. And I'm wondering to myself, isn't that quite redundant? Why would you be reading this book if not for an interest in the culture of the 80s? Why would you be reading this if you didn't already know what a text adventure is? That's just something that stuck out to me while I was here reading Ernest Cline's reinterpretation of the interactive fiction Wikipedia article. The first text adventure game Wade had ever played was called Colossal Cave, and he thought it was simple and crude, but after playing for a few minutes, I quickly became immersed in the reality created by the words on the screen. Somehow, the game's simple two-sentence room descriptions were able to conjure up vivid images in my mind's eye. That's Ernest Cline using his teenage mouthpiece to say, "Text adventures are still cool, Ernest. You're not that old." Way back then, Wade had played Zork all in one day. Since then, in a shocking display of unforgivable ignorance, I'd somehow forgotten two very important details about the game. Ernest Cline's idea of unforgivable ignorance being something like forgetting details of a text adventure, and not, say, putting transphobia in your Matrix pastiche. The two important details are that Zork begins with a character standing outside a shuttered White House, and number two, inside the living room of that White House there was a trophy case. And suddenly the quatrain makes sense. I'm not repeating the quatrain again. I'm sure you remember it. So the dwelling long neglected is that White House in Zork, which is recreated here on the planet Frobos. It's not made explicit here, but it does say this cluster of planets is rarely visited. So you could argue that that factors into the long neglected part as well. Wade's ship ends up at Frobos. With the possibility of sixes in the area, he puts some plans into place. He says he's got a ring of teleportation here that he looted from the hoard of a red dragon I'd slain on Gygax. I sincerely can't remember if that's ever been mentioned before. And if it hasn't, that seems weird for a book that's so dedicated on earmarking its Chekhov's guns. So his intention that his spaceship, the Vonnegut, cloaks immediately as it leaves hyperspace. Then he's going to use his ring of teleportation, which he can only use once a month, to get down to the planet's surface and have the ship follow him slowly afterwards. Hopefully this means he's going to avoid being shot by sixers. It would probably have been a better idea to save the teleportation thing to escape, but what do I know? Sidebar, the ring of teleportation has an activation command, which is the word Brundle. Now, I thought with it being a teleportation thing, that'd be a reference to the character from The Fly, but that's spelled differently. That's spelled Brundle. From what I can see, the internet's best guess is that it's supposed to refer to the character from The Fly, so I can only hope Wade gets horribly mutated in a teleporter accident. But what, you couldn't even spell his name right? Now, like Middletown, that planet full of copies of Halliday's hometown, Frobos is full of 512 copies of the Zork playing field. Since H has already got the key, all the sixers need to do is use the Finder's crispy pancake of finding, and they'd be able to locate the planet that the key is on. So Wade touches down, and this is really annoying to me. My surroundings were eerily familiar. The opening text description in the game Zork reads as follows. West of house. You are standing in an open field west of a white house with a boarded front door. There is a small mailbox here. My avatar now stood in that open field, just west of the White House. The front door of the old Victorian mansion was boarded up, and there was a mailbox just a few yards away from me at the end of the walkway leading to the house. And he goes on to describe what this place would look like. Remember last episode when I was on about authenticity and programming your old video arcades into the Video Game Arcade Museum, and how, unlike vinyl records, nothing would capture the authenticity of the original? Well, this place has nothing to do with text adventure games. He's not typing two-word commands, he's just running around a game environment. It's not authentic to the source material at all. We're told that Wade forces a window open at the back of the house and climbs inside, and that he finds himself in the kitchen. And the rest of this paragraph is just describing what was already described to you in Zork. He's just obnoxiously rephrasing his source material. The next paragraph starts with, but the kitchen also contained things that weren't mentioned in the game's text description of this room, as if to point out the plagiarism in the previous paragraph. Now at the end of this slam poem about what you might find in a kitchen is cereal. One entire cupboard was crammed with boxes of vintage breakfast cereals, most of which had been discontinued before I'd been born. Were you born in the 70s or 80s? Because prepare to enjoy this list of cereal from when you were a child. Fruit Loops, Honeycombs, Lucky Charms, Count Chocula, Quisp, Frosted Flakes. And hidden way at the back was a lone box of Cap'n Crunch. Printed clearly on the front of it were the words, "Free toy whistle inside." And listeners, if you weren't following along, this is likely to contain a clue to the Jade Key's location. True enough, the box of cereal does contain the plastic toy whistle that Wade was looking for. But when he blows into it, it makes no sound. Breakfast is ruined! Wait, if it's a Victorian mansion, then why is there modern cereal in it? From here on out, Wade follows the details of Zork in his Grail diary. If he didn't even think it was relevant back then, why does he have so many detailed notes about it? Presumably this clove of garlic he collects in the kitchen is important in some way. And then he finds the empty trophy cabinet in the living room. At this point he also collects a battery-powered lantern and a sword. And because he knows everything there is to know about Zork, apparently, he uncovers a trapdoor underneath the rug, leading down into a dark cellar. As with the game of Pac-Man in the previous chapter, most of Wade's achievements occur in a page break. If you remember earlier on, I was complaining about getting a detailed rundown of his game of Joust, and lately I've been complaining that we're not getting enough detail, so maybe I'm just completely unpleasable. But predictably enough, our hero has come equipped with boundless knowledge about the game, so that nothing he actually does is a challenge at all. Following his playthrough of the original game, he's managed to collect all 19 treasures and defeat creatures like trolls and cyclops and a really annoying thief. And there's something here that I would tweet out as a joke. I would probably tweet out something like, if I were likely to be eaten by a grue, I would simply avoid it. Like a couple of weeks back, I tweeted something like, if the virus tries to get me, I would simply dodge it. You know, that meme about how there's a simple action to take and it proves impossible. Nothing with that kind of sentence structure can be taken seriously anymore. So here's what Ernest actually wrote. As for the legendary grue, lurking in the dark, waiting to dine on my flesh, I simply avoided him. In fact, I'm going to tweet that out as a joke right now. If I were likely to be eaten by a grue, I would simply avoid it. Let's see how many likes that tweet gets by the end of this episode. Aside from the Cap'n Crunch whistle hidden in the kitchen, I found no surprises or deviations from the original game. So if you want something more interesting to do than reading this chapter, I suggest watching a Let's Play of Zork. To solve this immersive 3-dimensional version of Zork, I simply had to perform the exact same actions required to solve the original text-based game. What is the point? What's the point? So he completes the game in 22 minutes, and by this time, the Vonnegut has caught up with him. If the Sixers are in the area, that's only a matter of time before they track him down for suspicious activity. He goes back into the living room, and like the original game, collecting the trophies has generated a map to find the real treasure. But he's not bothered about completing the game this time. He's going to blow the whistle. Upon doing so, the whistle transformed into a small key, and my score on the scoreboard increased by 18,000 points. And he jumps back up on the scoreboard so that he's second place behind Artemis, but ahead of perpetual second banana H. And the Zork simulation resets itself as if he were never there. He's briefly panicked because the key in his hand seems to be silver rather than jade. But when I turned the key over and examined it more closely, I saw that it actually appeared to be wrapped in silver foil like a stick of gum or a bar of chocolate. And true enough, inside the foil is the the jade key. And just like the copper key, I saw that it had a clue etched into its surface. Continue your quest by taking the test. It's not immediately obvious what that means. So he also takes a look at the wrapper, and I'm just mentioning it in case this becomes relevant. It was silver foil on one side and white paper on the other. I didn't see any markings on either side. His time's up. He can hear the sound of Sixer spaceships arriving outside. As he runs out of the house, he sees a swarm of thousands of Sixer gunships in the sky. The Sixers seem to be trying to barricade all 512 instances of the White House. Given that this is both a PvP zone and a Chaos zone, the amount of Gunters that are bound to be turning up are going to turn this place into a bloodbath. So Wade really needs to beat feet. He climbs into the Vonnegut and a squadron of ships seems to land almost on top of him. but Mac's headroom had already got the engine running, and Wade floors it. Despite apparently being cloaked, which is never mentioned here but was earlier, the Sixers opened fire on him, but his top-of-the-line shields managed to hold up long enough for me to reach orbit. But they failed a few seconds later, and the Vonnegut's hull suffered an alarming amount of damage in the handful of seconds it took me to make the jump to light speed. And then page break number 2 for this chapter, how very generous. Wade takes his ship to Joe's garage, an orbital starship repair shop over in Sector 10. Joe's is described as an honest NPC-operated establishment. I can't imagine the number of complaints they'd receive if they created dishonest NPCs. I mean, that's always annoying in a game. I did it in tabletop once. I had a guy sell a map of a Lost Woods type location, somewhere that you would just get completely lost, and the map was just a bunch of trees and question marks. Good times. So while his ship's in the shop, Wade sends H an email saying that he's thankful for the tip-off he gave him. I also copped to being a colossally insensitive, self-centered asshole and begged him to forgive me. Begging's what you're gonna need, I think. And then he heads back to his stronghold and just monitors the news feeds. As expected, thousands of Gunters are arriving on scene and fighting off all the Sixers in hundreds of large-scale battles. The big Gunter clans are banding together to fight off the Sixers, and just because Ernest can't possibly give something a sensible name, it was the beginning of what would come to be known as the Battle of Frobos. No! Oh, please stop giving things stupid names. Wade's got his scoreboard monitor open as well. The next avatar to get the Jade Key is Sorrento himself, or at least someone using his employee number, and he's now in 4th place. Now that one Sixer knows where to find it, they all will. But to my surprise, the next avatar to snag the Jade Key was none other than Shoto. He did it less than 20 minutes after Sorrento. Fair play to Shoto. He's managed to complete Zork while also being shot at from every angle. So Wade expects Daito will be next. But that never happened. Instead, a few minutes after Shoto obtained his copy of the key, Daito's name disappeared from the scoreboard entirely. There was only one possible explanation. Daito had just been killed. End chapter 23. Daito was eaten by a grue! There you have it, folks. 23 chapters in and Ernest decided he hadn't mentioned enough text adventures. But what is the appeal of this? I've touched on it before about this book not being for people who didn't grow up with this stuff, which in itself is a silly thing because no one person could have grown up with everything. But if you played Zork growing up, what do you get from reading a novelization of an action-based version of a text adventure? There's so many layers of removal there. Are you excited by the idea of a VR Zork game and this is your concept? Do you go, oh, I remember that, but you skipped out all the puzzles that I remember and only just barely paid lip service to its most famous monster? What is there to get invested in any of that? If you're a text adventure purist, then there's nothing there for you. Though it's not like having Wade sat at a computer typing in terminal codes would have been much more interesting. Or would it? Well, it can't be any less compelling than a list of 80s cereal brands, can it? I feel like the general lack of Sixer presence on Frobos is, kind of spoiling my Artemis as a Sixer spy theory. I'm just glad that 10 chapters and 104 pages later, we've finally put the quatrain to bed. Any idea on what continue your quest by taking the test could be? Certainly the silver foil has put me in the mind of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Secret test of character, maybe? Although that wouldn't really fit in thematically with the 2 previous chapters we've had set around 80s video games. That was a short chapter all in all, almost as if Ernest couldn't think of anything else to do with the setting of Zork. Its short length didn't even provide us with any tension, because yet again, Wade knew exactly what to do at every juncture. I suppose its short length is merciful in a way. You can go on a text adventure of your own by following me on Twitter @TheLastGherkin or following the show on Twitter @RPN_pod. Watch with subtitles on YouTube, The Last Gherkin, or get an MP3 download at thelastgherkin.podbean.com while stocks last. Speaking of social media, why don't we see how that tweet's doing? Oh, 3 likes. Uncultured Philistines. Join me next time as I try and figure out, how did Daito die? Toe. I can tell you one thing. It probably had something to do with honor. Wade takes his ship to Joe's garage. I don't pronounce it like that. Wade takes his ship to Joe's garage. Join us next time as we try and find out what turned Daito into Dead Toe. Can I use that? Is that any good?